Hi guys, welcome back. We're in our next part of our series, maybe the bonus part of our series of this story of the Exodus. We can't have Israel getting out of Egypt and wandering around the desert just to stay in the desert. They got to get to Canaan. And that's what happens in our story today. And so we find our story in Joshua chapters 1 through 4. And I really struggled with this passage because there's so much in these chapters that I feel like I can't cut out. And so you'll have to bear with me. Hopefully we can get through a bunch of it and I'll maybe speak and read fast. But get your Bibles, open up to Joshua chapter 1. After the death of Moses, verse 1. The servant of the Lord, it came to pass that the Lord spoke to Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' assistant. Did you notice that? God speaks to Joshua just like he spoke to Moses. Goes on to say, Moses, verse 2, my servant is dead. Now therefore, arise, go over this Jordan. Now the Jordan wasn't any stream, and we find out later it's in flood stage. And he says, go across it. That's easier said than done with a whole bunch of people. He says, go over this Jordan. He doesn't say, I'll part it for you. He just says, go over it. You and all this people to the land which I am giving to them, the children of Israel. He's holding up his end of the deal, the promise. Every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given you, as I said to Moses. From the wilderness and this Lebanon, as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, and all the land of the Hittites, and to the great sea toward the going down of the sun, shall be your territory. No man shall be able to stand before you in all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not leave you, nor forsake you. Be strong and of good courage, for to this people you shall divide an inheritance, the land which I swore to their fathers to give them. Catch that? God tells Joshua, I'm going to do it. I promised I'm not going to let you down, and wherever you go, wherever your feet land, I'm going to give you that land. What a promise. Verse 7 says, only be strong and very courageous. These words are being said over and over. We read last week also. That you may observe to do according to all the law which Moses my servant commanded you, and do not turn from it to the right hand or to the left, that you may prosper wherever you go. This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate in it day and night, that you may observe to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have good success. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and of good courage. Do not be afraid nor be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Is that a promise for us too? That God is with us? And you remember, God told them to go over Jordan, the river. That was a strong river, especially in flood stage. And the people in Canaan were big and strong. He knew that firsthand. He had been a spy. And yet, God is still telling him, you know what? Be strong. Be courageous. You can do it. So what does Joshua do? Joshua commanded, verse 10, the officers of the people, saying, pass through the camp and command the people, saying, prepare provisions for yourselves. For within 3 days you will cross over this Jordan to go in to possess the land which the Lord your God has given you to possess. Joshua says to the people, God's got this. We're going to go in. And we fast forward to verse 16. He tells them some things, and you can go back and read it. But verse 16, so they answered the people. in response to Joshua, saying, "All that you command us, we will do. And wherever you send us, we will go. Just as we heeded Moses in all the things, so we will heed you." Now, I'm sure Joshua is scratching his head there. Well, they kind of didn't listen to Moses. Only, they say, "Only the Lord your God be with you, as he was with Moses." And then they add this: "Whoever rebels against your command and does not heed your words in all that you command him shall be put to death. Only be strong and of good courage." So the people respond. They say, "You know what? We're going to follow what you do, Joshua. We're going to follow, and the Lord be with you, and we're going to do it." This is a different response than the first time that they were by the Jordan. This is a different response. Remember, they were afraid before, but now they're like, "We can do it. We're going to follow you, Joshua." What if that was our response? When we see the river before us, when we see the struggles in Canaan, that we'll say, "You know what, God's going to go before us. We're going to follow." So to get ready for going over to the Jordan to see what's going on, Joshua does something. He sends 2 spies into Canaan. Now, in the beginning, the first time they tried to get into Canaan, they sent 12 spies. Or was it 10? 10. Yeah, anyway. 12 spies went to spy in Canaan. Yeah, 10 were bad, 2 were good. Yeah, there we go. And he sends them in, and 2 of them came back with a good report, Caleb and Joshua. And 10 came back with a bad report. "We can't do it, they're too big." And so I think Joshua smartens up. He says, "I'm going to just send 2. And so he handpicks these guys, I'm sure. Verse 1 of chapter 2. "Now Joshua, the son of Nun, sent 2 men from the acacia grove to spy secretly, saying, 'Go view the land, especially Jericho.'" Now Jericho, I think, was this key city. If you didn't take Jericho, it'd be hard to take everything else. And so they needed to see what was there. And so they go to Jericho. Now to get to Jericho, they had to get across the Jordan. So I don't know how they did that. They swam or floated, but they got across and they get into Jericho. And where do they go? It says, "So they went and came to the house of a harlot named Rahab and lodged there." Now I don't typically recommend people to go to the house of a harlot, right? But that's what they did. And then word got out. Verse 2. "And it was told the king of Jericho, saying, 'Behold, men have come here tonight from the children of Israel to search out the country.' So the king of Jericho sent to Rahab, saying, 'Bring out the men who have come to you, who have entered your house, for they have come to search out all the country.'" And I don't know if that was a typical occurrence, that the king would come and asking for someone at this establishment. But was that maybe typically what happened? She would hide people, and maybe wives would come looking. I don't know. But notice what she does. Verse 4, "Then the woman took the 2 men and hid them. So she said, 'Yes, men came to me, but I did not know where they came from. And it happened as the gate was being shut, when it was dark, that the men went out. Where the men went, I do not know. Pursue them quickly, for you may overtake them.'" And then there's this word in verse 6. "But she had brought them up to the roof and hidden them in with the stalks of flax, which she had laid in order on the roof. Then the men pursued them by the road to the Jordan to the fords, and as soon as those who pursued them had gone out, they shut the gate." Now, let me ask you this. Rahab, a harlot, goes and hides these men. Okay, that's good. She hid them. And then she goes and does something. She goes and lies to the king. "I don't know who they are. Was that good? Is it good to lie? Doesn't the Bible say thou shalt not lie? We went through that in the Ten Commandments series. What is she doing here? Should the men from Israel say, oh, you can't do that. You can't lie. Don't lie. Well, notice what happens. There's more to this story. Verse 8 says, now before they lay down, she came up to them on the roof and said to the men, I know that the Lord has given you the land, that the terror of you has fallen on us, and that all the inhabitants of the land are faint-hearted because of you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea, for when you came up out of Egypt. That was 40 years ago. And what you did to the two kings of the Amorites who were on the other side of the Jordan, Sihon and Og, whom you utterly destroyed. And as soon as we heard these things, our hearts melted. Neither did there remain any more courage in anyone because of you. For the Lord your God, He is God in heaven, above, and on earth beneath. And so they say, she says, you know what, your God is more powerful than all the gods I've ever heard of. He caused the Red Sea to open up and you walked across on dry land. And that was 40 years ago and people are still talking about it. They're afraid. And now you're going to be coming into Israel, or into Canaan. They hadn't even crossed the Jordan yet. And so she does something, I think, full of faith. She doesn't have a full knowledge of who God is fully. I mean, she understands He's powerful, a God of heaven above and of earth beneath. And so there's a desire here. Notice what she says, verse 12. Now therefore I beg you, swear to me by the Lord, since I have shown you kindness, that you also will show kindness to my father's house, and give me a true token, and spare my father, my mother, my brothers, my sister, and all that they have, and deliver our lives from death. And so these men have a choice. What do? Do they make a covenant or an agreement with this prostitute? Someone who lied, right, to the king? Who obviously was living a life of ill repute? What do? So the men answered her, our lives for yours. If none of you tell this business of ours, and it shall be, when the Lord has given us the land, that we will deal kindly and truly with you. She had that desire to know who God was. She was looking for salvation or life. And these two Israelites could have said, no, we don't let your kind in. But they didn't. They showed kindness back in return. Verse 15 says, then she let them down by a rope through the window, for her house was on the city wall. And she dwelt on the wall. And she said to them, get to the mountain, and lest the pursuers meet you. Hide there 3 days until the pursuers have returned. After it, you may go your way. So the men said to her, we will be blameless of this oath of ours, which you have made us swear, unless, when we come into the land, you bind this line of scarlet cord in the window through which you let us down. And unless you bring your mother, your father, your mother, your brothers, and all your father's household into your own home, so it shall be that whoever goes outside of the doors of your house into the street, his blood shall be on his own head, and we, these two men, will be guiltless. And whoever was with you in the house, his blood shall be on our head if his hand is laid on him. if a hand is laid on him. And if you tell this business of ours, then we will be free from our oath which we made us swear. And so they say, hey, you know what? You have to signify what house it is, this cord hanging out your window. And if they do, then everyone inside that house will be saved. But if anyone goes out, the blood will be on their own head. It will be their fault. And so this house of Rahab, this prostitution house, now is a house of salvation. Man, what if that could be today? And so they tell her, you've got to have the scarlet cord. And so verse 21 says, then she said, according to your words, so be it. And she sent them away, and they departed. And there's a line here that I thought was so powerful. And she bound the scarlet cord in the window. Remember, she's there on the wall, and a window on the wall, and this scarlet cord is now hanging out, the same cord that she let these guys out on. And so what if the people from the city saw that? What if the king saw that? Then he would know. Certainly it was a risk that she was taking, not only harboring and hiding them, but essentially putting a flag there saying, I did it. It was a risk the people, her family, had to take by going and staying in her house. But that's where life was. Verse 24 says, they come to Joshua, those two spies. They come to Joshua and said, truly the Lord has delivered all the land into our hands. For indeed, all the inhabitants of the country are faint-hearted because of us. Isn't that a different response than the spies that came out of Canaan the first time? What if that would have been the response before? They could have been in Canaan sooner. Well, we get to chapter 3. Verse 1, then Joshua rose early in the morning, and they set out from the acacia grove and came to the Jordan, he and all the children of Israel, and lodged there before they crossed over. And so it was, after 3 days, that the officers went through the camp, and they commanded the people, saying, when you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, and the priests and the Levites bearing it, carrying it, then you shall set out from your place and go after it. Yet there shall be a space between you and it, about 2,000 cubits by measure. Do not come near it, that you may know the way by which you must go, for you've not passed this way before. So they say, when you see the ark of the Lord going, go and follow it. Follow the Lord. But let him go first. About 2,000 cubits, about half a mile. Let him go first. Well, go first where? Into the Jordan. Verse 5. And Joshua said to the people, sanctify yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you. Then Joshua spoke to the priests, saying, take up the ark of the covenant and cross over before the people. Did you notice there in verse 5, Joshua tells the people, God's going to do something special. So what do you need to do? It says, sanctify yourselves. Make yourselves holy. Now, let me ask you this. Can we make ourselves holy? That's the Lord's work. So how do we make ourselves holy? We can't earn our salvation, so what is this? It's preparing our hearts for God. Coming in connection with him, in friendship with him, and letting him hang out with us, commune with us. And so when God's going to do something big, we need to have our hearts in the right direction, looking to see what he's going to do rather than looking at self. I think that's what we need to do in our own lives when God's going to do something big. So they took up the Ark of the Covenant, the Levites, and went before the people. They went first. And the Lord said to Joshua, this day I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all of Israel. that they may know that as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I think there was maybe some doubt still. Can Joshua do this? And it's not Joshua doing it, right? It's God doing it. But the people needed to know that God was with Joshua. You shall command the priests, he says, verse 8, who bear the ark of the covenant, saying, when you have come to the edge of the water of the Jordan, you shall stand in the Jordan. That's powerful. That's water rushing. So Joshua said to the children of Israel, come here, hear the words of the Lord your God. And Joshua said, by this you shall know that the living God is among you. Not some rock, but a living God. And that he will not without fail drive out from before you the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Hivites and the Perizzites and the Gershites and the Amorites and the Jebusites. All those ites. Behold, the ark of the Lord, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth is crossing over before you into the land of the Jordan. God's going first. Now, therefore, take for yourselves 12 men from the tribes of Israel, one man from each tribe, right? So one person from each. And it shall come to pass, as soon as the soles of the feet of the priests who bear the ark of the Lord of all the earth shall rest in the waters of the Jordan, that the waters of the Jordan shall be cut off, and the waters that come down from upstream, they shall stand as a heap. And so he's saying to them, you know what? You remember, you've heard this story of the Red Sea. God's going to do it again. And so it was. Verse 14. When the people set out from their camp and crossed over to the Jordan, that the priests bearing the ark of the covenant before the people, and those who bore the ark came to the Jordan, and the feet of the priests who bore the ark dipped in the edge of the water, for the Jordan overflows its banks during the whole time of the harvest. This is flood season. That the waters which came down from upstream stood still. They stopped. And rose in a heap very far away, at Adam, the city which is beside Zaratan. So the waters that went down into the sea of Arabah and the salt sea failed and were cut off, and the people crossed over opposite Jericho. And the priests who bore the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood firm on dry ground in the midst of the Jordan. And all Israel crossed over on dry ground until all the people had crossed completely over the Jordan. God did it. They crossed over the Red Sea, and none of them died. They all got across. Can you imagine experiencing that? And Caleb and Joshua, I'm sure I'm thinking, you know what, guys? We did this before in the Red Sea. It was even bigger. Maybe some of them that were children remember that day. And now they experienced it again, confirming that God was with them. There's things that we've seen in our life, in our past, growing up, and we saw God working. Can God work again? Yes. You can cross the Jordan with him. He can part the water in your life, in your situation. There's one more part that I can't skip over. They go through the Jordan. There's something more. Chapter 4, verse 1, and it came to pass, when all the people had crossed completely over the Jordan, that the Lord spoke to Joshua, saying, take for yourselves 12 men, and I'm sure strong men, from the people, one man from every tribe, and command them, saying, take for yourselves 12 stones from here, out of the midst of the Jordan, from where the priests' feet stood firm. And you shall carry them over with you and leave them in the lodging place where you lodge tonight. And Joshua called the 12 men whom he had appointed from the children of Israel, from every tribe. And he said to them, cross over before the ark of the Lord your God into the midst of the Jordan, and each of you take up a stone on his shoulder, according to the number of the tribes of the children of Israel. Why? Pick up a rock. Verse 6 says that this may be a sign among you when your children ask in time to come, saying, "What do these stones mean to you?" Then you shall answer them that the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord when you crossed over the Jordan. The waters of the Jordan were cut off, and these stones shall be for a memorial to the children of Israel forever. It says, we're going to make an altar, and we're going to make a monument, something to remember that these stones came from there. And the children of Israel did so, just as Joshua commanded, and took up 12 stones from the midst of the Jordan, some slimy stone that has barnacles or whatever on it, as the Lord had spoken to Joshua, according to the number of the tribes of Israel, and carried them over with them to the place where they lodged, and laid them down there. I remember this, right? And I'm sure you do too. But the part I never noticed was verse 9. Then Joshua set up 12 stones in the midst of the Jordan, in the place where the feet of the priests who bore the ark of the covenant stood. And they are there to this day. We know about the 12 stones that came across and they stayed on the bank side of the Jordan. But it sounds like Joshua had another 12 stones, and he had them in the middle of the Jordan. You know, anyone can make a pile of rocks on a riverbank. But it's real hard to make a pile of rocks in the middle of the river. And so this is what Joshua does. He says, this is where the priests stood, in the middle of the river. And so later on, when they come to that pile of rocks in the bank and ask the question, well, verse 21 says it again. Then he spoke to the children of Israel, saying, when your children ask their fathers in time to come, saying, what are these stones? Then you shall let your children know, saying, Israel crossed over the Jordan on dry land. For the Lord your God dried up the waters of the Jordan before you until you had crossed over, as the Lord your God did to the Red Sea, which he dried up before us until we had crossed over. That all the peoples, why? All the peoples of the earth may know the hand of the Lord, that it is mighty, and that you may fear the Lord your God forever. Be in awe of him forever. These rocks stood there in a pile or whatever formation that they were in as a witness to what God had already done. He had given them passage into Canaan. They had crossed the Red Sea too. He had been with them every step of the way, and now they're in Canaan. And that pile of rocks on the bank says that they got across, but there's the pile of rocks in the middle of the river that tells a bigger story. Because the water doesn't stay parted. The water, when they're across, comes rushing back. And it says that those rocks were still there, at least when this was written, probably down the road a few years. So what does that mean for us? You know, it's easy to say when we're finished, oh, God helped us. But when we have the marker, when we were in the middle, that's what we went through. Wow. God was with us. He's with us today. You have things in your life, these Jordan rivers, so to speak. You might even feel like you're in flood stage. And God's promised to be with us. He's promised to be with us. And you know, sometimes we might need to reach out to someone around us. We might even to reach out to someone that doesn't even maybe believe the same way we do. And and have a conversation with them. And they might see the power of God and desire it. They might not have everything figured out like Rahab didn't. But you know what? If you keep reading the Bible and you go to Matthew chapter 1, you see that Rahab is in the lineage of Jesus. There's redemption. She joined the family of God because she desired truth. She desired salvation, and we can have that too. And so let's extend it to those people. Like those two men of Israel extended salvation essentially to Rahab and her family. Let's extend salvation to people around us. And as we go through those rivers, God's with us. Let's pray. God, thank you. Thank you for being with us through those flood stage rivers. And thank you for the faith of Rahab. Be with us this week through those things. In your name, amen. Hey guys, thanks so much. We will have one more on this series. We have to get to Jericho. What happens there? But that's for next week. Have a blessed week.